Hello everyone and welcome back to Final Fantasy VII Intergrade. This part's a little bit interesting because it technically lets you choose which kind of route you want to go and who you're fighting, but it really doesn't matter that much. It's still a set series number of fights.
Ah, I see.
Elevator.
Is it like an easy, medium, hard kind of thing, or are they all just different?
No, it's just different.
Okay.
You wind up at the same place regardless.
Kind of reminds me of this is a weird comparison, but I suppose it's technically a Square Enix property now. Tomb Raider 4, where during the Teen Lara tutorial section, you have it ends with a race with your mentor to get to the ancient relic, but if you collect 6 golden trinkets along the way, a second path opens, which is the same thing but harder.
And do you get anything for doing it, or?
No, just bragging rights and a slightly different cutscene where Werner acknowledges that you won the race. I mean, he still gets his foot caught in the stupid thing anyway, but
I mean,
it is.
I guess there's something kind of like that in Final Fantasy VI too, on the river, where you get to choose which path you go down, and there's different fights on it depending on what you do. But I think you always fight Ultros at the end, no matter what.
I think, yeah, and I think there are treasures if you pick the correct path. But yeah, I'm remembering this. There's little places where your raft can stop in a cave and you can get a treasure. I need to play Final Fantasy VI. I need to get a hold of those stupid pixel remakes.
Apparently they're not bad as long as you do a mod to change the font.
They were apparently extremely lazy about localizing it, and the font that they used in the English version is the same font that the Japanese letters would be in, except it's the English characters from that font, which are ugly and bad.
Yeah, but I'm assuming a font mod is extremely easy to install, so probably wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah, I would imagine that's one of those things that you can that can be done relatively easy. Yeah.
It's just funny that Square Enix can't seem to get a decent port of their flagship games onto the PC first try.
It's not that they can't; it's that they won't. They're just lazy about it.
Yeah, it's. I don't know what's going on when it comes to that sort of stuff. It's not just Square, too. The original Shin Megami Tensei, the 1991 SNES game, has a complete English translation. But they only ever released it on Apple, on iPhone store. And, to top it up, they didn't even bother to update it. So, you can't even run it on modern phones anymore. Yeah. So they're just sitting on this perfectly good translation of one of their classic games, and they just won't put it onto modern stores for some reason.
And to be fair, I think the re-releases in the past have had a fairly lukewarm reception.
Oh, that's just because it's the original game, and the original SMT one has aged like milk from 1957.
Most of their games from before the PS2 era kind of have, to be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's still it's gotta be cheap to do. You give somebody, the translation's done. Give somebody a month to make it so that the buttons work correctly on Switch and that it doesn't bug out too bad, and then release it on the Nintendo eShop for $5, and you'll make your money back and then some, even if the reception isn't great. I mean, this is also just a game preservation thing. Westerners have never been able to play that game before. Is it great? Does it hold up super well? Not really, but it still would be cool to see.
It's kind of like Fire Emblem 1 when they finally release it here. It's is it a good game by today's standards? Absolutely not. But
yeah, and I mean the Dragon Quest games too. Are Dragon Quest 1 and 2 games that you really need to go back to and play? No, not really. Is it good that we have access to them? Yes, for sure. It's also good that we have
I mean,
access
like,
to 3, but that version's going to be obsolete in like a year, so don't.
I mean, like, when Sega released Phantasy Star 1 on Switch, I was ecstatic. Not because it's particularly good. It's actually, like, the most bare-bones thing ever, and I really wish they would just re-release the PS2 remake instead. But, like...
The Sega Ages port of Phantasy Star 1's actually really good, though. Like, they have a map. Like, you can know where the hell you're going, which is...
Oh, yeah, just having the dungeon map draw itself out in the corner makes the game, like 30 times more playable. But
do the other Phantasy Star games have first-person dungeons or third-person dungeons?
I think that was restricted to Phantasy Star 1.
Okay, good. That makes me 30% more excited to play the other games in the series. Because
the only other Sega RPG that I can think of with first-person dungeon is Shining in the Darkness, and fuck Shining in the Darkness. Why is that in every collection?
Because they have the ROM lying around.
Look, just I just want them. I'm a simple guy with simple needs. I just want them to re-release Shining Force CD and Shining Force 3, please.
Is that the 3's the Saturn one, right? Like
3's the Saturn one that was actually 3 games with like a save import, with like a really simple save import system going on.
That one seems harder, but like Shining Force CD.
Hey, look, we're fighting a Motobug.
Well, I mean, maybe they could take a page out of Falcom's book and get the fan translators to do the localizations for the.
Oh, they got the fan translate. Oh yeah, you mentioned this at one point. They got the
Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure are coming out relatively soon with Geofront's translation as the base.
Well, I'm sure that after the flack they got from the translation in Eve 8, where they literally translated one of the landmarks as Big Hole.
They've learned their lesson. Yeah, and the Trails series, to be fair, has been doing pretty well under the new localizers because they were smart enough to just get people who worked on the XC translations to work on their translations. So we've got a team on the Trails series that's been with the Trails series, at least in part, and they know how to do it right.
One thing, I guess, that I'm also grateful for with Final Fantasy VII getting remade is that we get competent translations for this game now. Not PlayStation 1 translations just have a really stilted and off feeling to them a lot of the time.
Don't even get me started on Wild Arms 2.
And I mean, you sort of get that with a lot of SNES translations as well, but it definitely, in terms of the PlayStation ones, I tend to feel it a lot more.
Chicken wuss.
Chicken. How dare you call me chicken wuss? I'll kill you.
It's like a really serious insult in Japanese, and the English translation makes him sound like a really impotent schoolyard bully.
Hey, chicken wuss, give me my lunch money, you nerd.
And then, like, Fujin and Raijin have these really odd speaking quirks, and, like, one of them just gets translated as adding to everything, and the other speaks in, like, all caps single word sentences. Okay.
Cool.
It's like, what does that even sound like when it's spoken out loud in English?
Oh, and don't get me started on like Game Boy translations of the time. It's actually kind of sad that the Pokemon translations on Game Boy Color are among some of the better ones.
They are. I played Final Fantasy Legend 3, when I was a kid, and that translation just barely works. Don't even think about getting a satisfying narrative experience out of 1 and 2 because it's not happening.
You see, the frustrating thing as well is that a lot of them can't even be worse. Like Gargoyle's Quest, for example. I love that game. Translation's awful, but it's like, at least it's funny awful, so you're laughing while you read all this stuff. Most of them are just like the standard stilted kind of bad, doesn't really make an awful lot of sense kind of bad. So it's not even something you can laugh at, as opposed to the Demon Realm was safe? Question mark, question mark, question mark, again. You know.
Yeah, that's kind of like a lot of where the original Final Fantasy VII's bad translation fell. I mean, like, everyone laughs at this guy are sick, but there are a lot of lines in the game that would contribute quite a bit to the story, right? But like the grammar's just broken and half of the meaning gets lost.
Yeah, it's not even so much like the typos or grammatical issues. It's more just stuff just doesn't sound quite right, and we've gotten so much better at that, and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah. At the very least, if you got the PC version, you can install the Reunion mod with the correct names option checked, because I don't really think like calling everything districts is any more correct than calling them sectors. I'm sorry.
By the way, speaking of that Scarlet boss fight from last part.
But apart from the weird naming pickiness of the translators, the fan translation of FF7 is actually quite good.
So they were sectors in the original and districts in the new version, or
they were probably districts in the Japanese version, because that's an English word that they can use. That's my guess. But like, when you're actually saying everything in English, like Sector 7 just sounds better. It's the word that native English speakers would have used if they were writing the game, you know? So
yeah, districts feels more like homey, for lack of a better word. It feels something that's less mechanical, less sectioned off. Sectioned. You know, it feels, if something's like, oh, it's the packing district, it's the business district, you know, it implies something a little bit different than sector, where it's just like, okay, this is Sector 7. You know, it feels more like constricting, I guess. I don't know. It's a vague feeling a lot of the time, but these things are important.
The sector numbers were kind of like supposed to come off as low-key dehumanizing.
Yes. That's the perfect way for it.
Yeah, so making it sound more sci-fi kind of makes it sound more robotic, and that, by extension, gets that feeling across, I guess. Also, it's like Final Fantasy VII's fan translation is the only place we're ever going to see like what Barrett would have looked like in English if they hadn't played up this Mr. T persona, which was entirely the English version.
And then they just kind of kept it for everything else. Yeah.
It's weird. Even in Japan, Final Fantasy VII's overall canon was influenced by its American version.
How else other than Barrett was that?
Well, from what I understand, there was a lot more emphasis on Hojo in the original version. Like, as the villain of the game, rather. Whereas the American translation and the perception of the game in the public consciousness based on that version emphasized Sephiroth more.
Oh, okay, yeah. I remember hearing this, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, is that we, in the West, kind of focused more on Sephiroth than in Japan. Which is kind of weird when I think about it, considering how Japanese Sephiroth kind of feels. You know, like he feels like the prototypical anime bad guy.
Well, I mean, maybe that's part of why we took to him more than they did. I don't know. But, like, it's not like Sephiroth is unpopular over there, as far as I know. It's just that, like, Final Fantasy VII was really popular internationally, so its international appeal was taken into account when they decided on the direction of the additional material. You know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
This is a cool robot, and I'm gonna give Scarlet props for taking a page out of Dr. Eggman's book and actually fucking driving the thing to fight you.
And end with the limit break.
Oh, I always
style.
love ending stuff like this, like with a limit break or whatever. Like that's always really cool to me.
You know, I might be misreading this, but do the bosses in this DLC not have that annoying quality where when you hit a damage phase, they block your damage?
No, they do. It's just I know when they're coming, so I didn't, use anything big on them.
Oh, okay. I thought they were learning. I guess I was wrong.
How the tables have turned.
How the turntables.
Oh, she actually did it. She did the anime laugh.
Not quite an oh ho ho, but it's close enough.
What are you doing?
Oh, is she gonna blow up? Okay, you didn't have to put it there. That was not necessary.
Not necessary, but from her perspective, very fun.
I guess that's true. Yes.
Also, it also that is like a place that Scarlet would reasonably be expected to just casually place her hand. So it's actually a good place for a self-destruct
Wait, is that
button.
Zack?
No, it's not
That
Zack.
Okay, these two are Nero and Vice. They are brothers who are like
ground.
the leaders of Deep Ground. Yes. Unfortunately, they were characters with potential that, well,
are stuck in Dirge of Cerberus.
Yeah, so it's good to see them here.
And you can't actually fight Vice. Not in this. He's an extra super hard mega boss in the main game that you get in like New Game Plus. That you can do in the virtual training thing.
There is no replicating you. They ought to know better.
So basically what Vice is, well, how do I put this?
It has been too long since
He's another kind of super soldier, not unlike Sephiroth, but we never have actually found out precisely what his deal is, because he shows up right at the fucking tail end of Dirge of Cerberus, and barely has 2 seconds to breathe as a character himself, because Hojo uploads his brain into him, and essentially possesses him.
Cool.
Not really.
And then Hojo tries to be the final boss, but then Vice takes over again and becomes the final boss himself. It's very, very strange.
I thought Hojo died in FF7.
No.
No? Okay, then I just...
Well, apparently not, but again, whether or not Dirge of Cerberus winds up happening in this timeline reality is yet to be seen.
I mean, I guess it's neat that they acknowledge one of the cooler parts of it.
Yeah, they'll probably keep some little things of it around, such as Vice, but it's clear they're not going to just, oh, are we going to get a Dirge of Cerberus remake after this? And the answer is no, that game was not popular and no one liked it.
Well, I mean, if the whole Deep Ground crew shows up, then, well, we get to see the second coming of the fucking Metal Gear Solid ripoffs. Let's see. Which ones did they have? Let's see. Azula Cerulean, who was literally Vulcan Raven glowing blue. Oh yeah, Rosso, the Crimson, who was the sexy sniper. What else?
Why is she just telling Yuffie about their plan?
Because it's too late to stop it. Because at this point, Cloud and crew are climbing the tower trying to stop it.
This is how you know
there's
that
absolutely
Yuffie's...
no chance Yuffie has any way of getting over there in time.
This is how you know that Yuffie's not like halfway as jaded or inclined to revenge as Sonon, because like if Sonon were in Yuffie's position, he would have turned around and just fucking murdered Scarlet before running off.
Because he doesn't give a shit if the play drops.
Just would have smashed her skull in with that big-ass staff of his. Yuffie could have easily just sliced her throat and run, not even lost any time. But she doesn't even think to do that. She just lets Scarlet be. And I think like she might be the only ninja in Wutai who would have done that at this point.
Well, I feel like she also... I don't know. Well, she also cares that they dropped the thing on the slums, and I don't know how much many of the other Wutai people would care, because they hate Midgar.
Well, because that death and... Well, they hate Shinra, but not necessarily the people of Midgar. It's complicated.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense, yeah.
Deep ground.
I mean, just callously killing off their own people is the kind of thing that would remind, that would remind these two of losing the war and all the people they lost in the process.
Yeah, that also makes sense.
Now, these deep ground soldiers, this is an interesting thing because Dirge of Cerberus in Japan had a multiplayer mode with its own story.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and I'm pretty sure you were one of these like deep ground soldiers in that mode. That mode never made it into the Western release.
So it was like Portal 2 co-op. Then
it was. I think it was a competitive multiplayer mode. I don't know, but like the irritating thing about that is that some of the more interesting deep ground related story elements in Dirge of Cerberus were multiplayer story mode things. So we here in the West once again got to miss out on one of the actually interesting parts of the complication of Final Fantasy VII.
Dirge of Cerberus is usually like one of the #1 things people talk about when they talk about the complication of Final Fantasy VII. Because other big name one is, what's it called? Crisis Core. And people like that one for the most part.
Well, Crisis Core is pretty well liked because it actually adds to the story. It develops Zack as a character. It tells some of the story of what led up to Final Fantasy VII. It shows us Aerith and Cloud when they were before the game started. We even actually meet Tifa at one point, if I remember correctly. So like, it's a good prequel, and it turns Zack into a legitimately likable character. So likable.
Gaga.
So likable, in fact, that the game's overbearingly anime presentation did not ruin him. You can argue for or against Genesis, but Angeal was a good character. I like Angeal, and it was the game, as far as us in the West anyway, it was the first game that actually gave us a look at the Wutai War, even if it was a pretty short-lived look that just made us want to see more of what was going on there. So there's a lot to Crisis Core. Dirge of Cerberus is just like convoluted, made-up sequel bullshit that adds nothing to anything.
Him and Shadow the Hedgehog were having a grand old time during that era, let's just say that.
Yeah.